Open your fridge and take a hard look at what you trust. That pack of bacon you opened a few days ago, edges dulling, texture changing, smell turning. This isn't a small inconvenience. It's a failure unfolding in real time. Not because you mishandled it, but because it was never built to last in the first place. Modern food gives the illusion of stability, but the moment you break the seal, the clock accelerates. That should unsettle you. Now step back several centuries into a world without electricity, plastic, or safety labels. A farmer slaughters a pig as winter sets in. He salts the meat heavily, smokes it slowly, and hangs it in a cold, dry space. Months later, sometimes over a year, the same meat is not just edible, but transformed. Richer, denser, preserved not by machinery, but by design. That contrast isn't nostalgia, it's evidence. So the real question is unavoidable. How did people with fewer tools create food that endured longer than what we produce today with all our technology? This isn't just about meat. It's about understanding the system we depend on and the one we've forgotten. If you want to understand why your food fails so quickly, you have to start with what it's optimized for. Modern meat production is not designed around longevity. It's designed around turnover. Look at the label closely, and you'll often find added water near the top. That's not incidental. It's deliberate. Industrial processing injects brine directly into meat to increase weight and speed up preparation. This process replaces time with machinery. Instead of allowing salt to slowly penetrate and transform the structure, it forces moisture into the product in minutes. The result is heavier meat, faster production, and higher profits. But there's a trade-off. That added water creates the perfect environment for microbial growth. In scientific terms, it raises water activity, meaning there's more free moisture available for bacteria to use. And bacteria don't hesitate. This is why refrigeration isn't just helpful in the modern system, it's essential. Every stage, from processing to transport to storage, depends on keeping temperatures low enough to slow microbial growth. The moment that chain breaks, even briefly, spoilage accelerates. What you're buying isn't preserved food, it's food on life support. In earlier centuries, preservation began with a completely different mindset. The goal wasn't to keep food fresh. Freshness is fragile. The goal was transformation. Salt played a central role, and not in the casual way we use it today. It was a controlled, deliberate tool. When meat was packed in salt, the process triggered a fundamental shift. Through osmosis, moisture was drawn out of the tissue while salt moved inward. This exchange didn't just dry the meat, it altered its internal environment. As water left, the conditions that bacteria rely on began to disappear. The meat became increasingly inhospitable to microbial life. Instead of a nutrient-rich surface, it turned into something closer to a desert. Without sufficient water, bacteria cannot grow, reproduce, or survive effectively. This wasn't guesswork. It was a reliable system rooted in physical law. And it meant that properly cured meat could remain stable for extended periods without refrigeration because the environment itself had been engineered against decay. Salt alone was powerful, but it wasn't the only barrier. Smoke introduced another dimension, one that combined chemistry with preservation. Cold smoking, in particular, was widely used. This process didn't cook the meat. Instead, it exposed it to low-temperature smoke over long periods, allowing compounds from the wood to settle into the surface. These compounds included phenols and organic acids, both of which played critical roles. Phenols acted as natural antimicrobial agents, limiting bacterial growth on the surface. They also slowed oxidation, helping preserve fats from turning rancid over time. Organic acids lowered the surface pH, creating conditions that many microbes struggle to tolerate. Together, these effects formed a protective layer. The outer surface of the meat became a barrier, one that discouraged bacterial colonization and slowed chemical degradation. Combined with the reduced moisture from salting, this created a multi-layered defense system. Preservation wasn't just about methods, it was about timing. Slaughtering animals at the right moment, typically as temperatures dropped in late autumn, was essential. Cold weather acted as a natural ally. Lower temperatures slowed microbial activity, buying valuable time to process large quantities of meat. Without that window, spoilage would outpace preservation efforts. This seasonal rhythm wasn't optional, it was built into survival. People aligned their practices with environmental conditions, using nature itself as part of the system. Preservation wasn't isolated from the world. It worked with it. Not every piece of meat could be cured and stored long-term. Scraps, organs, and smaller cuts required immediate use. This is where continuous cooking systems came into play. A pot kept at a steady high temperature, often maintained over a constant fire, could safely hold and cycle ingredients over time. As long as the temperature remained above the threshold where bacteria could thrive, the contents remained safe. This wasn't preservation in the traditional sense, it was control. By maintaining heat, people prevented the conditions that allow spoilage to begin. Food didn't need to last for months if it never entered a state where decay could take hold. Today's food packaging often uses language that suggests a return to traditional methods. Terms like uncured imply simplicity and authenticity. But the reality is more complex. Many of these products still rely on compounds that function in the same way as traditional curing agents. The difference lies in how they're presented. The chemistry hasn't changed, only the framing. More importantly, these products frequently retain high moisture levels. Regardless of how they're labeled, they still depend heavily on refrigeration to remain safe. The fundamental issue, water content, remains unaddressed. This is where understanding the underlying principles becomes critical. Labels can guide perception, but they don't change physics. Modern food distribution relies on a continuous, unbroken chain of refrigeration. From processing facilities to transport to retail storage, every step depends on maintaining low temperatures. This system works efficiently under normal conditions. But it has a single point of failure. If the cold chain is disrupted, whether by power outages, logistical issues, or delays, the consequences are immediate and widespread. Without refrigeration, high moisture products become vulnerable very quickly. The safeguards that kept bacteria in check disappear, and spoilage accelerates across the entire system. This fragility isn't always visible, but it's always present. What sets earlier preservation systems apart is not just their effectiveness, but their independence. They didn't rely on continuous energy input. Once properly prepared, the food could remain stable under a wide range of conditions. This resilience came from layering multiple barriers, reducing moisture, altering chemical environments, and protecting surfaces. Each step reinforced the others, creating a system that didn't depend on a single point of control. It also required knowledge. These methods weren't passive, they were practiced, refined, and understood. And that understanding made the difference between stability and loss. You don't need to replicate historical conditions to benefit from this knowledge, but you do need to shift how you think about food. Start by paying attention to structure and moisture. Products that have been properly dried or cured feel different. They're denser, more concentrated, less dependent on immediate refrigeration. They behave differently when cooked, when stored, and when handled. Understanding why those differences exist gives you a framework. You begin to recognize the distinction between food that has been preserved and food that is simply being kept from spoiling. That awareness alone changes how you buy, store, and evaluate what you eat. At its core, this isn't just about meat preservation, it's about control over conditions. Bacteria, enzymes, and chemical reactions all follow predictable rules. When you understand those rules, you can shape outcomes. Modern systems prioritize convenience, and they work well under stable conditions. But they often remove the need to understand the underlying processes. When those systems fail, the knowledge gap becomes apparent. Traditional methods didn't eliminate risk, but they distributed it. They created multiple layers of protection, reducing dependence on any single factor. When you strip away the packaging and the assumptions, the contrast becomes clear. One system depends on constant support. The other is built to stand on its own. The difference isn't technology, it's design. It's the decision to either maintain conditions artificially or to transform the food so those conditions are no longer required. That knowledge hasn't disappeared. It's still accessible, still applicable, and still relevant. Whether you're interested in history, food, or long-term resilience, the principles remain the same. So the next time you look at what's in your refrigerator, consider what you're really relying on. Because once you understand the difference between preservation and postponement, you start to see food and survival very differently. If you value this kind of deep, practical insight, subscribe to Intelligent Survival. Share this with someone who takes food seriously, and stay connected for more breakdowns of the systems that kept people alive long before modern convenience took over.